Hello, I am Heather King, writer, arts and culture columnist, solo practitioner. That's what they call it in the law when you have your own practice. Solo practitioners, who I would always work for when I was a lawyer, disliking the thought of the corporate world. But anyway, I just like the phrase occurred to me, and I kind of like it. Anyway, I have been depressed and sort of feeling like I'm losing my mind. I'm not exactly sure why. Everything is fine. Uh, and yet it could be the fall melancholy. I don't know. More will be revealed. But anyway, last time I did a recording, it was called One Day at a Time, and we never get a day off. So yesterday I actually had in many ways, it was kind of a perfect day. And so I just thought I would describe it because to someone else it would just be what? Like what kind of a day is that? But to me it had all the elements of kind of spiritual, emotional, mental, um, little bit of nature, a lot of prayer, exercise, reading. Um, so I'm going to talk about it in a sec, but I just read this Substack article this morning. It's called The Dawn of the Post-Literate Society. It's by this guy, James Marriott, Marriott, two R's, two T's. Um, the Dawn of the Post-Literate Society. And here's a little excerpt. And he talks about how there's been a steep decline as you don't need to see a study to know that that's true in reading, um, which is shocking to me. And reading has always been a backbone of my life. And I'm sure my own attention span, partly because of age, but also, as he talks about, of course, a lot, the smartphone. Um, I'm sure that has contributed, or all online the world that we live in has, in some sense, contributed to my own perhaps diminished attention span, etc. But I still read. I just read a ton, and I actually don't spend a lot of time, yeah, scrolling through. I'll go on Instagram to see and Facebook to see if anyone's left a message. That's about it. But anyway, here's a little excerpt from James Marriott's article. The epidemic of anxiety, depression, and purposelessness afflicting young people in the 21st century is often linked to the isolation and negative social comparison fostered by smartphones. It is also a direct product of the pointlessness, fragmentation, and triviality of the culture of this screen, which is wholly unequipped to speak to the deep human needs for curiosity, narrative, deep attention, and artistic fulfillment. This draining away of culture, critical thinking, and intelligence represents a tragic loss of human potential and human flourishing. It is also one of the major challenges facing modern societies. Our vast, interconnected, tolerant, and technologically advanced civilization. Tolerant? I'm not sure I agree with that. Anyway, is founded on the complex, rational kinds of thinking fostered by literacy. As Walter Ong, O-N-G, writes in his book, Orality and Literacy, certain kinds of complex and logical thinking simply cannot be achieved without reading and writing. And I mean, what are the functions of the increasing lack of literacy? And it's not like I'm some huge academic or anything. But still, just steeped. Even public schools in New Hampshire in the 1950s, we were just steeped in the legend of Sleepy Hollow and all just, Robinson Crusoe. I mean, we were steeped, The Wind in the Willows, in story and literature and music. Um, Piano lessons, in those days you would still sort of sing in class, and we had a piano in our house. We sang, my mother would play hymns and we would sing, I mean, kind of making fun of it, but not really. Um, but one of the functions is I find myself, I mean, I always feel like a loner, or it's kind of oddball, but because of the lack of literacy, like more and more, I think you feel in exile in the society. There's so little common ground, and what common ground there is, oh, have you seen the Netflix series? Have you seen some, yeah, some bingeable, or some new asinine to me movie? And I was just like, no. I'm going to talk. I just finished watching actually The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex, Betty Davis and Errol Flynn. And it's actually a pretty great movie. And at this late stage, history is for sure my absolute least strong suit. I mean, it's really pathetic. So I finally learned, oh, there have been two Elizabeths. One, Elizabeth the First, the Elizabeth the Second just died. I mean, I literally didn't know that. I also just watched Charles Laughton in The Private Lives, I think it's called, of Henry VIII. Oh, Elizabeth was his daughter. Anyway, that's the kind of stuff I tend to watch. Not to mention, yeah, I'm actually off. I went through like years of just film noir, and so I'm trying to watch movies that are a little bit more. Oh, I just watched Peter Lorre. Who knew? Did 1935 Crime and Punishment. Peter Lorre plays Raskolnikov, and it's actually also a pretty darn good movie. Joseph von Sternberg was the director who directed Marlene Dietrich, as we know, and The Blue Angel and a bunch of other stuff. Um, anyway, I digress. So, yeah, but you feel more and more like, I mean, you mentioned, I mean, even a book like Anna Karenina that every human being on earth who's who knows how to read should at least have heard of. And people are like, huh? Um, so anyway, and I mean, I mentioned too, I've been listening to this guy, Benjamin McAvoy. I guess he's actually quite popular. I, of course, have never heard of him, but he has this thing called Hardcore Literature, and he has a bunch of free podcasts. You can also join somehow. There's a fee-based thing, and take a deeper look at or follow along where we'll do a whole series on Anna Karenina, for example, or War and Peace, or Crime and Punishment, or many, many others, the remembrance of things past. So that's been good. But anyway, so this was my day yesterday. Okay, woke. I wrote in my journal yesterday, close to perfection. Up at 5 to pray. So I usually wake around 5. This morning it wasn't until 6, which was good because I needed the sleep. But so I immediately get up, make my coffee, pray the office. I'm an oblate. I'm a Benedictine oblate. I prayed the office way before I became an oblate. But so I'll pray the office of readings, which is another name for which is vigils. Then I'll read that day's liturgy, what the readings for the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, and then I will usually read. I usually have some kind of I read a book from my a page from my little Al-Anon book, Hope for Today or Courage to Change or whatever. Um, and now I'm reading a commentary on the Benedictine rule for oblates. Very good. Just does a kind of a section from the rule of Saint Benedict, and then a kind of analysis and a commentary and an application. Um, I often have a book by Father Donald Haggerty, and I'll just read maybe one or two short sections. He always has something good to say, and lately it's been, or the last couple of days, yeah, so dear to my heart of most. This great thing that passage I read yesterday actually about, because I puzzle about this, the difference between that there's a distinction between the good person and the holy person. And the good person usually has lots of um, feathers in their cap in a way. They do good works, they do stuff, you can point to it. Whereas the contemplative, who may not do anything that is remotely remarkable, or maybe not hands-on sort of works of mercy, but has a different kind of deep, deep interior life that is totally offered up for the salvation of souls in the ultimate. So it's kind of yeah, it's kind of interesting, and that life is totally concealed. And he said it is often even concealed inside a cloister. In other words, the true contemplative, even the other nuns might not know. We saw this with St. Teresa of Lisieux. She died, and her fellow nuns were like, "Ah, big deal. What was the big deal about her? She didn't." So it's an interior life. Anyway, so that's what I do in the morning, and then I'll just sit, and then I'll, usually I have my crucifix that, I light the candle before, there's incense, there's candles actually too. Sometimes more in the winter. I have all kinds of permutations, but uh and yeah, and then I'll just usually just sit quietly for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And then I'll say morning prayer, which is what would be called lauds in the divine office. Um, and sort of um, invite God into my day. I mean, I've already done my morning offering. I offer you my through the Immaculate Heart of Mary. I offer you my prayers, works, joys, and sufferings of this day, in union with the holy sacrifice of the Mass throughout the world. So, offering my day to His Sacred Heart, salvation of souls, reunion of all Christians, in other words, inviting the world in. And I always dedicate my day to a certain person or persons. One day it might be people I know who have had abortions, for example, for their healing. Might be someone who's sick, might be someone who's troubled, might be someone I have a resentment against. Those people are often in my, open my heart toward this person. This person is my sister or brother. I'm not one bit better or different than. So, um, yeah, and then sort of plan my day. I have a little notebook, and I like to have my little to-do list, if you want to call it that. Things often that I need to do that day. Get the oil changed, or go to the post office with my rent check, or stuff like that. Often emails that need to be responded to. But more than that, it'll be sort of when I'm going to go to mass, usually, maybe the gym, whatever. Try to invite God into that. Hunch, intuition. How should I order my day? I have a lot of freedom in many ways. I don't have to punch a clock, and that is a beautiful thing. At the same time, it can sometimes be, I want to cram everything in to the morning usually because I have a lot of energy in the morning, and then my energy fades. So I can get like anxious about, oh, am I going to get it? Anyway, so then took a shower. Oh no, I know. I went to 7 a.m. mass. That's right. I had gotten up at 5, went to 7 a.m. mass at Saints Peter and Paul Church up the street. Lovely, Father Vincent. And then I was thought I'd have a holy hour or holy half hour or holy 40 minutes. And as happens often, there's some people who want to say the rosary. Okay, fine, great. I said the rosary with them. And interestingly, I had offered my day that yesterday for uh, women who've had abortions, and their unborn children, of course. And so that was who they dedicated the rosary um for that exact group of people. So that was nice. I did stay even after the rosary was done for a while. Um, so that was lovely. Okay, so then I came home. Um, did some I have terrible sciatica. I know you're very interested in this, but so okay, got to take care of my body. I mean, I would have to take care of it anyway, but so I went online and looked at some new exercises and kind of went through those. And meanwhile, I was listening to a speaker at a 12-step meeting, and the meeting, the speaker and the whole thing just didn't, sometimes the whole thing just rubs me the wrong way or doesn't feed me or something. So that is the type of thing that can derail me, when things, oh, that's it, I'm exhausted. I'm not even gonna forget it. I'm not even gonna, do the rest of I need to rest, I'll do this thing. I'm like, I'm tired and people are disturbing me. So I'm gonna I mean, that's a temptation. Sometimes I really do need to rest. But I kind of overcame that and said, go for a walk. It's beautiful. So I went for a walk, and while walking, I listened to this guy, professor, the late, turns out Michael Sugrue, Sugrue, who was I think, philosophy professor. I think at Princeton, was it Princeton or Yale? He was this kind of khaki clad Ivy League looking guy in his younger day, in his when he was in his in the 1970s. And then he became this guy with, I thought they were two different people. I couldn't figure it out from the pictures on YouTube. But then he grew like sort of fat and grew a long white beard and looked completely different. But anyway, and it turns out I'd never listened to him before. He has a series of lectures that his daughter apparently put up after, as he was nearing death. He died, I think, in 2024 of some kind of cancer, and maybe prostate cancer. But this turns out to be his most listened to lecture, and it was on Marcus Aurelius, who is another person, of course, I've heard of, know virtually nothing about. So the lecture was great. It was very interesting. But what was really interesting to me after, because I really thought about it. And he talked a lot about, he was like a stoic and sort of, this is how life is. You die, there's pain, there's suffering. Why talk about it? Why complain about it? Do your job and do a good job, do an excellent job, and don't ever expect to be thanked. How dare you? And um, yeah, you do your duty, you don't complain, even though people are often stupid and unbelievably annoying like that. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. But what was interesting to me was after I got home, I looked up to see if he was Catholic, and he actually was. I don't know if he was a practicing Catholic, but he'd been raised Catholic. And what interested me was that he never, he was very admiring of Marcus Aurelius, who sounds admirable by all accounts. But he said something like, he never has he had a peer, never have we seen the likes of him. And I thought, well, what about Christ? Because to me, this is what fascinates me. Every, for every great man or woman, always Christ has also exhibited whatever that person has, except with another dimension, like yeast all through the loaf, in a way. And Christ, in fact, that whole the passage in the gospel where he says, the servant is like kind of flattened him, doing like working, and Jesus, who, as you know, can be sometimes sound kind of quite harsh, says, okay, the master says, all right, take your seat at the last place. And I mean, there's not going to be like a fawning thank you. And this is something Marcus Aurelius said. It's like, oh yeah, Christ said that. Not to mention, Christ was the uber, not complaining, doing his duty, putting up with all manner of substandard people, namely us. But with Christ too, it's there's such another layer of, I mean, it's all underlain by love, not by duty and not by rigidity, but there's a love, there's a poetry, there's a sense of humor, there's a kind of aching, oh, Jerusalem, I would have gathered you to my breast like a mother hen, and you would not. There's always, uh, Christ did not face death with that. He willingly went to his death, but he did not do this kind of like, hey, no problem. Lord, I've loved the beauty of your house. Why have you forsaken me? It was deep, deep human agony and pathos. So, um, to me, that infinitely transcends. Um, this is just an aside. However great Marcus Aurelius was, and I'm sure I don't know the half about him. But anyway, so the point is, this is my day. Listening to stuff and then pondering it and learning a little bit more about it and running it over in my head. And this is the life of the mind. That is the life of. Um, Again, huge, huge gaps in my knowledge, obviously, but that's okay. Um, that's okay. We're here to learn. And so now we know a little bit about Marcus Aurelius and Michael. Sugru, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. Anyway, so then what did I do? Oh, then I got in my car and drove to a meeting at which we discuss sort of, for lack of a better, it's for meeting for friends of family, ostensibly family and friends of alcoholics and addicts, and sort of how to deal with the kind of unhealthy patterns and thoughts, behavior patterns and thoughts that can arise around a very sick, very mystifying person who you can spend your life trying to figure out, never going to make an iota of progress with the active alcoholic or addict. And meanwhile, your own life drains out bit by bit. What about my life? I can't save this person. I can't. And many people, we need to learn that. You're not going to save someone. You can like pray for them for sure. But the best thing you can do for an alcoholic or addict, or really anyone, is lead your own life fully. So that's, but I need a lot of corroboration and encouragement and support and remembering and that and learning the lessons of that way of thought yet further. So that was fine. Um, it wasn't, I didn't get the people weren't especially warm as they often aren't. Like I tried, I went to like smile at the person beside me. Do you find this too? And like the guy, he wouldn't even look, you know what I mean? It's like people won't even look at you. I don't know if this is a modern thing or what. It's like, whoa. Um, anyway, all right, God bless him. Then I went to Trader Joe's, very exciting. Got some flowers, did my kind of weekly shopping. I'm going to Philadelphia next Wednesday, so that's exciting. So I didn't get too much, lest the Lord forbid something spoil. Um, oh, and then I received in the mail when I got home a new volume 3 of the Divine Office. I think it's volume 3. Yeah, I think it's weeks 17 to 34, which we're on now. I had bought mine used like 30 years ago. So the thing is totally bedraggled, and was finally thought, oh, maybe you could treat yourself to a new. So that was exciting to me. Okay, then I watched some more I finished up Peter Lorre and Crime and Punishment. Then just for a little break, and I had my lunch, and then I drove to the gym, very, very close by. I drove to the gym. Oh, so don't want to go, but good, gotta take this is the better part of love, and part of it is being a good steward of our body. That's part of the interior life, huge part. Um, Doing stuff when you don't want to, when you'd rather lie down and uh, it's kind of veg in some way. All right, so while I'm there, I actually listened to Benjamin McAvoy on hardcore literature, and he had this particular lecture was on like great opening lines, how various the great novels begin. And so we had Dickens and Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and Proust and Moby Dick, Call Me Ishmael. And he had some stuff to say around that. So that was interesting. Um, okay, so I came home and then I took my evening walk and listened to, I love this station on YouTube. It's called Cathaholic, Cathaholic, Cathaholic Music. And it's some guy, I think he's from Scotland, I'm not sure. And he just does this beautiful, it's kind of like old school hymns, Abide with Me. He'll sing at evening prayer. I just love him. I was listening to another, now there's a few places on YouTube you can listen to the Divine Office. And there was one that I had been listening to for a while, and it just evolved into constant ads and AI Catholic app. I mean, please. I mean, artificial intelligence, please. And so it's just bombarding and like take this pilgrimage, it's so clearly a marketing the prayer seemed way less important than getting a ton of followers and these big, Catholic names. And so this kind of, I mean, God bless whoever does this stuff. And you could pay to get an ad free, but I just didn't, the whole thing just became too slick for me. So I love this guy. He has a bunch of extra, has all these Marian hymns and things in Latin. But anyway, so I walked. This is probably not strictly how you're supposed to pray, but I listened to him and not just follow along, but say the words along with him. So that was evening prayer. And then I listened to and prayed along with the Stations of the Cross. It's in Alfred, what's his name? Liguori. I don't think it's Alfred. It's something that begins with an A. Saint Liguori, Anthony, maybe. Um, Then what? Oh, I came back. Oh, finished Crime and Punishment, had dinner. I had salmon. Oh, and then meanwhile, okay, and then at night, and then afterward, I did some more exercises and I practiced the piano, um, Haydn sonata. And meanwhile, I discovered, okay, I'm gonna shut up soon. But meanwhile, I discovered, because while I was, I don't know, looking at something or other, I found this wonderful YouTube. I think it's a 1957, I want to say, or eight interview with Dame Edith Sitwell. I'm on this British kick. The British are just such an odd, yeah, such an odd, um, and wonderful and weird, and sometimes kind of horrifying people. But anyway, so Dame Edith Sitwell, I think she died in 65 or 66 or something, but came from a eccentric British kind of family of aristocrats, and they've traced their line back to the Plantagenets or whatever they're called, Plantagenets. Um, Her father was just utterly eccentric and wandered about the giant, estate they lived in, one of the many. Um, and according to her mother, hated her. They both sort of hated her. She was the oldest. They, of course, wanted a boy, an heir. She was a girl. She was very not traditionally pretty by any stretch. In later years, I loved the way she looked. She had this kind of nobility, but she came from and she and her two younger brothers, Osbert and Sacheverell, she became a poet and they were also literary figures, writers and critics and so forth. And so it's a fairly well-known family. Um, but yeah, she was just odd. She lived with her governess. Supposedly, she was a lifelong virgin. She lived with her governess well into adulthood. I mean, like, I think into her 40s or something. I mean, obviously, her childhood had deeply scarred her, but she's one of these, patrician British voices, and she dressed turbans and feathers and huge rings and big velvet flowing capes and just an eccentric, but with a sense of humor. Said she was very shy. So then I followed up. Okay, so she wrote her own memoir called Taken Care Of. You can find it on Internet Archive for free. She also wrote a book, aside from her many books of poetry, called I think it's called English Eccentrics or British Eccentrics. So that too is on, or I downloaded it from somewhere. You can find it for free, a PDF. So I'm dying to read that because she profiles all these, the guy who like never got out of his bathtub and just sat in there drinking champagne or something. Um, and then there's probably more than one, but a biography of her. And, I don't want to, because this is the thing, she converted. And then she'd fall in love with, one guy was gay and she was completely besotted with him for 30 years or something like that. And then another guy was thuggish, like some kind of, playboy thug guy, totally unavailable, in other words. And I think, without knowing too much about her, that's often what happens when you have a traumatic or child marked by abandonment and you pursue as an adult other completely unavailable people, maybe because you yourself are unavailable in some way. Anyway, so just a little digression. Uh, so I love going from sort of high culture to lower culture or mid culture or something like that. Because you can't think about Marcus Aurelius all day, or I can't anyway. So that was great. Then I listened to or I started watching The Private Lives of Elizabeth, and meanwhile I mean I prayed like probably midday prayer or noon prayer, or I try to say the Angelus always at noon. So it's not, my prayer. It's always woven in and out the day. I talk to Jesus throughout the day. Um, so it is, those were just the kind of exterior things. I didn't talk as much about the interior, what goes on interiorly. But the point is, so there it is. And that's like it's a day that doesn't have a ton of wasted, not that there's anything wrong with just sitting and looking at the birds for an hour or two or walking, a huge thing. So, and I don't like frenetic activity. I don't like a day that is packed with obligations, with appointments. I always like to have time in between. But there's a day that when I look back on it, yeah, I had some learning in it, and in some sense, some deep thinking, a lot of prayer, physical exercise. Yeah, and I walked in my neighborhood in Tucson, which is full of birds and trees and flowering bushes, and the sky is beautiful. So, one day at a time, and is that not the glory of God? Is that not a life? I hope. Yeah, there were things in there of calling people and talking to people and maybe sending someone a little money. I actually made a $50 contribution to Internet Archive, which I use quite a bit and I'm grateful for. Um, yeah, recovery, so which is always participating with people, mass, obviously offered up to and for and with all the world with the monks at St. Andrew's Abbey. So it's a life of contemplative life, more or less, solitary life that is, however, ordered always outward. So anyway, there you go. Read, read, read. If there's going to be a remnant, I mean, this at this point is like a resistance. If you want to be a resistor or an activist, it's like read the great books, get away from the doom scrolling and the hate social media and all of that just fries and liquefies our brains. Um, yeah. Oh, and then, also, all right, and then I'll shut up. So I'm also looking at the museums and gardens and so forth in Philadelphia and kind of planning my trip there. I also ordered a biography of, is it Alfred Barnes or Albert Barnes? I'm pretty sure it's Alfred Barnes, the guy who, the very irascible, kind of tempestuous, tons of great stuff about him, tons of stuff that was impossible, who collected, after whom the Barnes collection is named. This where I've been before, but this incredible museum, I don't even know if they call it a museum, but it's a collection. It's in is or was in the house that he lived in, but um, it's kind of an eclectic selection, but lots of Soutine, who I love, who I discovered actually through the Barnes collection many, many years ago. Picasso, Cezanne, they have a ton of Cezannes. So the type of, yeah, I love, that's kind of one of my favorite. So anyway, lots to do, exciting, and we're really charged to keep ourselves excited somehow, because it is easy to fall, as we know, into whatever, just sort of low-grade depression or ennui or wandering mindlessly about looking for something to fill the existential void that only God can fill. Okay, thank you so much for listening. A day in the life, I'm going to call this. Okay, carry on. Have a great week.